Good afternoon again. This is the IDSA security, the IDSA for Zero Trust Security, or Zero Trust Identity, and some of you have been here and continue to be here. We have, this is session 4 of 6. That's just really just to talk about integrations that define the story around the Zero Trust Identity. Up at this point, you've seen things like multi-factor authentication, you've seen adaptive authentication, you've seen risk-based authentication and risk-based access control where the SIM is gotten involved in disconnected users and stuff like that. I know the last demo wasn't perfect, but that's obviously the demo gods getting involved. This is kind of the IDSA slide where we talk about identity-centric security. So identity's in the middle of all these security components. We say the future is now. Why? As I said previously, it's now because these are GA-based integrations. So these integrations are focused on, you can take this out of here, you can go back to your office. If you own any of these products, you can do this. And that's the principle behind what we're trying to accomplish here, is give you that ability to look at some of these products and be able to integrate them and get this real-time data to take action on. And of course, the Zero Trust Identity story is user and devices are all untrustworthy, right? That's pretty much the story we're going with. Okay, next. So as I said, this is number 4 of 6. This one has Gemalto, Ping, and Beyond Trust as the components within this demo. And I'll turn it over to Asad Ali from Gemalto to take over.
Thank you. So thanks, Jerry, for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for coming at this rather late afternoon session for the master session on the last day of the conference. So we realize that people have travel plans, so we really appreciate you sticking around and coming over. So thanks again. My name is Asad Ali. I'm a principal researcher at Gemalto, where I work on authentication and access management solutions, and basically looking far ahead to see what can be done in future and all the research aspects that go into that. For this particular integration, my other partners in crime, we have Michelle from Beyond Trust, and we have Edward and Chris from Ping Identity. Needless to say that we are really excited to be part of IDSA because this is an organization that is basically building the framework for how components can come together, and equally excited for me to come here and present to you the work that we have done. A little bit about Gemalto in the background. I mean, it has a very long history and rich history of building security-related products in a wide range of disciplines. And like all IDSA members which are here, we take security very seriously in all aspects. Now, with that said, let me set the stage for what I'm going to talk about. I mean, you've heard all these aspects about integration. What I want to touch upon are 2 things that have already been mentioned, but I want to put them in a certain context. And I want to put them in the context of how we have seen the evolution of authentication happen and what purpose it serves. So the first thing that we all realize, and now it's pretty much a universally accepted fact, that passwords are weak. I mean, we've been saying that for almost more than a decade now, if not more. But now the realization has really set in. I mean, you won't find anybody who would say, okay, well, I want to stay with passwords. So the question is, okay, what else do you want to do? So you want to go with multi-factor authentication, you want to go with a higher level of assurance. And that can come from either OTP, it can come from PKI, or it can come with the new incarnation of public cryptography, which we find in FIDO. At the same time, you could implement it with software, you could implement it with hardware, or you could implement it even with the secure form of hardware that we refer to as secure elements. Now, regardless of how you do that, the second realization is that it's not enough to check the authentication at the perimeter only. What you want to do is to basically check it as close to the real critical interactions that the user would be doing with your system. Those interactions could be accessing an application. Those interactions could be accessing data, or it could be accessing any transaction that you're doing, or even within an application doing specific things which would require privileged access. And those are some of the things that you've already seen in the previous 3 presentations and demos, and that's what we'll continue to do with what you'll see here. Now, interestingly, I mean, you heard some of those themes in Andre's keynote yesterday. I mean, he was talking about the fact that, well, do the authentication more often, do it more close. One other thing that you mentioned when he was giving a shout out to IDSA was that identity is an integration play. So this is an exact quote from one of his slides, that the focus is on integration, and that's exactly what we are doing over here, that we are doing the integration between different components. Now, the integration itself, I mean, you may say, okay, well, what do you mean by integration? So at the very outset, I mean, two things that I take away from integration. The first one is interoperability, and then the second one is delegation. And the two have to work together hand in hand. You cannot have delegation unless you have really nice integration. Now, we've seen that in other aspects of the industry which are not software-based, where things work together seamlessly. But in software, particularly in the identity ecosystem, we have to build something which is very similar. So this is exactly what is being presented here in these master sessions in IDSA, and what we will see in this talk. So again, going back to the same familiar slide that you've seen earlier, so where do we fit in? So on the identity side, we'll be demonstrating access management. On the security side, we'll be demonstrating privileged access management, the PAM. And of course, we'll connect them together in a seamless way, so we have a really nice interoperability. So in terms of the building blocks, so as Jerry mentioned, so there are three partners in this integration demonstration. There's Ping Identity that brings Ping Federate. There's Gemalto that brings STAR and SAS. STAR is SafeNet Trusted Access. SAS is SafeNet Authentication Service. And then we have Beyond Trust that is bringing in Power Broker. So how do we take the pieces from each one of them to build the solution that we want? So we start off with Ping Identity. The piece that we're picking out from Ping Identity is the Ping Federate piece. So you have your enterprise applications, which are on the left-hand side. So you basically look at the big block that we have around Ping Federate. So you have your enterprise applications. Then you have Ping Federate, which on one end is providing single sign-on to those applications. On the back end, it is doing access management, and then based upon that access management, it would delegate the authentication to somebody else. I mean, you can do that with Ping ID, which is their product, or you could do that with the third party. So this is purely second factor authentication, which is delegated, not the access management. Access management is still within Ping Federate. We look at the second block now, which is provided by Gemalto. And in Gemalto, again, we have the same ecosystem, the same flow, where we have the enterprise applications in the cloud or on-premise, and they are connecting to Gemalto's STAR, SafeNet Authentication, SafeNet Trusted Access, and it has a single sign-on in the front end. It has access management on the back end, and then at the very back, in order to do the multi-factor authentication, it has a SaaS component, the SafeNet Authentication Service. So very similar to what Ping Federate has. Now on to Power Broker, which is provided by Beyond Trust. So Beyond Trust would basically give us the privileged access management, which is that not only at the very entry, but each and every command that you want to do, which could have a privileged access, whether it be on Linux, whether it be on Windows, you can do that. Now, the combination of all of these creates some really interesting plays, which not only serves the purpose of showing that, okay, well, we can do really smooth interoperability, but also basically builds a case that is very useful for the end customers. And in this particular demonstration, what we have chosen to do is that we'll take Ping Federate, which will do single sign-on. So any application that you have in the cloud, which is connecting to Ping Federate, it will continue to connect to Ping Federate. And as far as that application is concerned, they're talking to Ping Federate. Now, behind the scenes, what we did was that we took out the access management piece from Ping Federate and pushed that over to another vendor, which in this case is Gemalto. So the single sign-on, not just the multi-factor authentication, because the multi-factor authentication is something which has been demonstrated before. But what we did was that, okay, we took out the complete access management and we put that in Gemalto. So the Gemalto will basically take care of determining whether the authentication is needed and how it is needed, and then going about doing that. And then Beyond Trust would come in, and now the Beyond Trust can serve two purposes. One is that, okay, in order to do the initial authentication, it can go from Ping Federate to do the initial login. But then more importantly, once that initial login is done, for each and every privileged command, it will basically reach out for multi-factor authentication again. And at that point, we could also add in the access management policies. So as you'll see in the demonstration, right now we are doing the MFA part, and the access management can easily be added in. So with that said, I'll quickly go through the flows. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it a lot because we'll see some of that in the demo, and then I'll explain it a bit more. So we start off with the step number 1, where the user goes to a service provider. We'll use Salesforce as an example, and clicks on login, saying, okay, I want to authenticate with Ping Federate. So now we have this message which is coming in. 2A is the SAML request, which is sent from Ping Federate to Salesforce to Ping Federate. Ping Federate says, aha, for this user, I need to delegate. So basically, it routes it internally, and the request now ends up at Gemalto. Gemalto does the access management piece, number 3, and says, okay, for this user, what do I need to do? What does the policy say? Do I need to authenticate right now? How often do I authenticate? And with what do I authenticate? In this particular case, we'll use the mobile as a second factor of authentication. So push message is sent to the user responds, and now the same flow works now back in the opposite direction. And in the end, Ping Federate gets the response back from star, and then generates a SAML response, which is sent back to Salesforce, and the user logs in. That's the first scenario that we'll show in the demonstration. The second scenario is where Beyond Trust comes in. So now, number 3 is very similar to what we saw before, where it's a classical authentication which is happening through delegation. And now the user is logged in, but the key point over here is that the user is logged in with what is called the least privilege. However, now the user invokes a command. It can either be a Windows command, it could be a Linux command in case the admin is logged into that. And with that command, Beyond Trust would figure out that, well, this particular command needs an elevated level of access. So we cannot use that with the least privileged account that we had before. In order to make sure that it's the same user, now a request is generated to Gemalto saying that, okay, please authenticate this user so I can allow the user to perform the function that the user intends to do. Again, the same thing goes to the user. We basically do a 2-factor authentication using a push notification to the mobile, and the flow works back, and the user is logged in. So these are the 2 flows that we'll demonstrate. And in the first scenario, you'll see the single sign-on, access management, MFA. In the second scenario, you'll see PAM and MFA, and we'll showcase both Linux and Windows. So let's switch to let's see if it still shows up over there. Can we see the screen in other than the presentation mode? So do I need to do something different, or? Okay. That's it. Perfect. Okay, excellent. So let me push this a bit to the side over here, and then put this in, so I can run through this one more time if I have to. Okay, and now what we'll do is that we'll start the first scenario. So in the first scenario, let me open up step number 1, which is that I'm going to my Salesforce account. So on this Salesforce account, I mean, once we're done watching the doggies run, I can click on the Ping Federate over here, because now I'm saying instead of logging in directly into Salesforce, I would like to use Ping Federate. I click on Ping Federate, and now it gives me the classical dialog from the Ping Federate. In this case, we chose to leave these 2 options in, because I can either say I want to log in with Ping Federate directly using the username and password, or I can say, well, instead of logging in over here, I want to delegate to star. So once I delegate to star, now I'm taking over to the star portal, where I enter my user ID over here. So with this user, let me say login, and in star there's an option of you can either click on the passcode by generating it manually, or in this case I say, well, push me the notification. So as you see over here, I see the notification on my phone. I'll view it, I'll approve it, and put my finger over here. And now once it goes back, you'll see that what's happening on this side is these flows. So we sent it over, the user accepted, star, and we logged in. Now, for the user, it was very seamless. I mean, they don't know all this integration and magic stuff which is happening at the back. As far as they're concerned, they just logged into Ping Federate. But behind the scenes, the Ping Federate is basically delegating the access management to Star, and Star is basically pointing out and saying, okay, let's do a push notification. Now, of course, we could have actually put a third party over there to do the Ping Fed, to do the actual multi-factor authentication through another integrator or through another vendor. And that's the beauty of the solutions that, okay, since we are using standard protocols and standard connectivity layers, it's very easy to replace one component with the other. So that was the first demonstration. Now let's move to the second one, where we'll showcase how we are doing that with Beyond Trust in the picture. So let's close this window, and for this to work, let me open up, because this is based upon an admin control, so let me open up an RDP session. And for this one, let's see. Okay. So once I connect to the server, so this is a server that we have running in the cloud. So I log into that, and now what I'll do is that I want to log on to connect to my CentOS box. So I'll open up my CentOS box, log in as, now again, this thing could also be authenticated so that we can do the multi-factor, but what we want to demonstrate is not the initial login, but what happens after that. So let me log into this account. Okay, so I've logged in. In fact, can you see the font may be a little small, so let me see if I can increase this font, because it will be interesting to see what we have. So let's see, settings, and I think appearance, change. So let's change that to 16 and bold. Let's see how. That's better? Excellent. Okay, so now I'm logged in over here. So let me basically just run some command. Okay, where am I? I'm over here. Now let me say, who am I? It tells me I'm logged in as ALE. So in the context of how the Power Broker is working is that there are certain commands that you can escalate. And let me type one command, and the way you want to escalate those commands is through what is called the PB run. So we'll call PB run, who am I? So as soon as I say that, it'll say, aha, in order for this you need a password, but I say I don't have a password, send me a push notification. So push notification comes over here. I'll view, let's say, come on, view, approve. And again, the same flow happens as we saw in the previous integration when we are working with Ping Federate, that the request is going back, and now it is channeled back to the requester. But notice what is happening now. When I say PB run, who am I, it tells me I'm root. So this is the privilege escalation which is being provided by the Power Broker and Beyond Trust. Because now what I can see is that, okay, I can run certain commands which have been administrated or defined in the policy to require an elevated level of access. And that elevated level of access in the controls that we have set are done through a multi-factor authentication which is provided by Gemalto. So let's run another one. So let me say I want to add a user. And I want to add a user, let's name it user123. And just to make sure that that user does not exist, let me try to do this, and sure enough, nothing comes back. I did a cat on that and gripped it with user123 and nothing was there. So now let me say user add user123. Aha, permission denied. Because this command is deemed as a privileged command, which as a Ali account, I cannot run. What I need is the root account for that. And how do I get the root account? I do a PB run. So now let me issue the same command again, but this time let's do a PB run. Right of it. Again the same thing, password. And if I hold up my phone, here's the message again. So I'll view, approve, put my finger for the second factor, and I've logged in. And now we'll go through the same flow that it'll basically go back to the to the Gemalto server, and once it is approved, it will go back. Now, notice that I didn't get any error message or access denied. If I look at that cat command again, voila, the user is there. So this defines us how the privileged access command, and there are certain commands that we can put in which we deem to be the ones which we required. So let's say if I say user del user 123, same thing would happen. It will say, well, you don't have the permissions to do this. So this is how it can be integrated on the Linux side. So let me just run one more because we want to say, okay, well, what do you do in the Windows case? So in the Windows case, let's go over here, and I'll run a command which has been marked as privileged, which is, let's say, to run the registry editor. So if the registry editor has to be run with the privilege command, I'll approve it over here. And now you'll see that once all the magic is done in the back end, we'll have the registry editor which will pop up. So there we are. So as you see, I mean, these can be done both on the Linux side as well as on the Windows side. So let's close this one. I'll close up this. Okay. So let's go to the slide again, and I want to show you what we can do over here. Let's see, normal. And let's go back. We were on the demo. So let's quickly go through what we just saw. So I just want to go through some screenshots which were taken. I mean, there's not enough time to actually take you live into the admin portal of these servers and run through that. But at least you can get a picture of what has been done. So here's the screen from Ping Federate, where you can see that the orange arrows are pointing to some of the things which are critical. So we are setting the protocol. I mean, it can be OpenID Connect if you want, but in this case we are using SAML. And then it's giving you the entity ID where it has to connect to. So again, standard stuff which you find in Ping Federate configuration. Now in terms of binding, what I mentioned earlier, I mean, there are various ways of doing the binding. I mean, Ping Federate allows you to have connectors that you can go through. You can write adapters, or you could do it purely on the configuration page. The same thing on what's happening on the star portal. So this is the star portal from Gemalto, and again you can see that we are in the applications page. So we are defining, okay, which service provider we are connecting to, and in this case we are saying, okay, well, we're coming from Ping Federate, and we have the same protocol and the same entity ID. Some more information about how you set it up, and then this is where the access management would come in. Now, we were previously in the applications tab. Now we are in the policies tab, where we define, okay, for Ping Federate, when the user comes in, these are the policies that we want. I mean, what is the scope of the policy? It applies to all users. What are the requirements? We need to have authentication, and we need to have a two-factor authentication, which is based upon OTP. And then after that, we could layer it, say, okay, well, for certain specific users, this is what I want to do. So I mean, it's a rich interface of allowing you to set the access management, but you have set the access management at a very fine-grained control. Now over to what we see on the Beyond Trust side. I mean, again, things which can be configured very easily. So here we are setting up the policy for the reg edit on the Windows guys. And this is the start of the page, and then here we go into the details, and we say, okay, well, what kind of two-factor authentication we want. So again, it's a very intuitive way for the system administrator to set up these rules, which can then be adhered to. Again, another example of what happens on the Linux side. So on the Linux side, we are saying, okay, here's a config file. And the interesting thing about the config file is that you notice that there are things that we pointed out earlier. So I'll expand that a bit, which says that, okay, well, these are the three users for which I want you to set these controls. For demo user, for Michael, and then for ALE. Well, what are the commands that I want you to be use to have these PB run so that elevated access can be done? Well, who am I? User add and user deal. So these are the three commands that we tested. So as soon as these commands were typed, you said, well, you don't have permissions. You need to have the elevated access. Who am I is the only command which does execute, because they want to show you who the current permissions are. But for the other ones, you don't. And then it basically says, okay, well, in order to do the second factor authentication, which service do you want? And in this case, we are listing Gemalto radius, because we send the command over radius. Now, at the same time, it's possible to do that over OpenID Connect and SAML as well. But for the purposes of the demonstration, that was the easiest path. So in order to put it together, we said, okay, let's go with this. But behind the scenes, we know that it can be done with anyone. So with that said, that's all I have. So thank you so much for your patience, and if there are any questions.
Yeah, and any questions, we're running out of time, so Asad can be in the back. We have someone from Beyond Trust here to help support any of those questions within the configuration information. Chris Price will be here shortly. He's doing the next one as well, but he's also from Ping, which will walk through setting some of that information up as well. You can see here the IDSA members. I think there's one more slide. There's our website. So if you wanted to go out, take a look at some of the stuff we're talking about, the integrations that are there, the use cases that we talk through, and so forth. With that, we'll wrap up, and I have two more integration sessions to talk about.